Hi, everybody. My name is Richard Harold. I work for the Filecoin Foundation as a product advisor. So most of my work has been with the client success working group and trying to figure out, what's the best way to on-chain pay deals. My previous experience is a company called Wasabi. It's now a large S3 cloud compatible storage layer, and Seal Storage after that, which is one of the SPs where I was actually working a lot of the same work in the past. And so what I thought, I've been trying to sell the idea of object storage in the Filecoin infrastructure for a long, long time. But I don't think, and whenever I do, people go, "Oh, we've done that before. It's not going to work." And so what I wanted to do was go on the back in the past and see, some of the things we tried before, maybe learn some lessons from, so why we didn't, what was missing for it, and then cheaper approach with this great new thing, Filecoin Onchain Cloud, as the future of storage and the Filecoin ecosystem. So we had a lot of discovery calls the past couple months, 20 discovery calls, and this is actually a direct quote from one of the customers. Why is it still hard for a developer to just upload a file? Now it's a little different, with everything else out there, but it was a pretty common question and a pretty hard thing to answer. I remember when I first joined Filecoin, I asked, "Raise your hand, who here has uploaded a file on the Filecoin?" And it wasn't as many people as you might think. How many people have uploaded a file on the Filecoin? Hey! Well, my work's done here. I'm sorry. So yeah, as you guys are the experts here, you know what we're talking about. My goal is kind of talk about how tech is finally ready to really get into the enterprise, cloud market and engage with these customers that before we thought were unattainable because of X, Y, and Z. So yeah, so these are the some of the biggest attempts I could see. Again, I was not around for half of these, so I'm sure I got a lot of it wrong. So please speak out, be brutally honest if anything doesn't make sense here. So 2019, Powergate launched. 2020, Estuary, Singularity, Project Motion, and DeStor. I'm going to go through all these one to one. So, case, what's that? It's not the Eras tour. If Claire was here, it'd be really nice Taylor Swift photos. But I'm not a I'm not a Tay Tay fan. So, um, I know. I was too emo in college. FFS Powergate. What it was, a powerful developer-focused API for Filecoin IPFS multi-tier storage. So yeah, this was great because you could have a chromatic controls possible, and the S3, the early adopters, it was a pretty good tool there, but it was hackathon helper and not a production product. It was not something that like finally launched that we could really get to multiple developers there. XL pivoted and better scope tools started to emerge.
Powergate effectively was a super node that had both a Lotus node and a Kubo node running in the same kind of like platform. And so, as a client, you could run one of these nodes. You could make storage deals, I believe, based on pushing to the IPFS Kubo node. It could then make a storage deal with a storage provider, and you effectively installed this and were able to like multiplex between the two of them. But to your point, like it didn't do a lot of like deep speaking between the two of them. And so it didn't actually let you like effectively make an IPFS call, which then turned around and made a Kubo call, or sorry, make a Filecoin Lotus retrieval request seamlessly within the system. It was pretty clunky.
A one package deal. It was supposed to be one package deal using IPFS to onboard data quickly and then get it out to Filecoin.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, and that's just funny because actually I was when I first joined here, my first ideas was to combine S3 gateway with a Lotus node, and I was basically repeating history just with an S3 onboard layer as opposed to IPFS, and things have changed. Yeah. So moving on, Estuary. You want to give context Estuary too, or I'm curious.
I mean, Estuary was an on ramp, as you're saying. It was like uh both open source software and kind of a service that was trying to multiplex these two things and work with larger volumes of data.
Exactly, yeah, it was really focused towards large data sets and not really geared towards enterprise data sets. Enterprise people, they're not gonna upload your largest data set unless, they kick the tires and get viability early on. So, it was a really, really good, project, but, it was not a 99.9, perfect uptime product. And it wasn't built for, private S3 style data, if you want authentication, encryption, and all that, it's not for that, it's for public data good. 3, Singularity. Is Ian here? No, Ian. Our first major attempt at I say native S3 compatible layer. People are going to say, wait, that wasn't an S3 compatible layer. But one of the goals of Singularity was to facilitate onboarding of data onto Filecoin from many different sources, including S3 gateways. So it could take, if you connected S3 gateway to even Wasabi, it could translate that, do the storage deals and get the thing up and running there. So, it really got close. Yeah, it was the S3 abstraction was like a thin add-on to a complicated UX required sophisticated understanding of core Filecoin components. It didn't solve the problem of complexity. Recently, for a public survey call, someone wanted to go right to the source there, and I tried to set them up with Singularity in there, and then the amount of hurdles led to it. I actually have a document that photo resulted in them not being inclined to use this as a service. So yeah, it was almost there, but just a little bit too much complexity for the average paid deal to do it.
So Singularity does still exist and is still used by some subset of institutions, but maybe is your flag here? The other two are deprecated services that do not like exist in the network anymore. They're no longer supported. Singularity is still supported, but I think for a subset of use cases, I don't know whether the S3 layer within Singularity is still supported. Do you know?
No, this should all be in present tense. That was
Okay,
bad editing from my editor, so
okay, no worries.
blame myself, and we'll continue. No,
Okay, it still doesn't meet the kind of like fast write expectation, probably because it's not doing, it doesn't have a caching layer, and so it's trying to make POREP deals based on this S3
yeah, and
self-hosted API.
more importantly, if you are trying to get someone, even if large data set, to upload to it, they would not be motivated unless there was a check written to you to encourage you to do it at the current stage, I would say. But that doesn't mean in the future that can't be the case. I know Ian's got a lot of good plans to improve upon it. Project Motion. Uh, this was actually almost close to exactly what we need. A project enabled to fast writes, SU level 200K by integrating with Pro Pipeline. It identified a correct and critical technical solution for S3 level rate performance, but there was a barrier commitment. This is it came towards the time of people going through different projects in different areas there, and the project never went to the final finishing line before that could happen.
My understanding is, like, agreed, but Project Motion was designed as kind of like an MSP level tooling so that, not the MSP that we've been talking about, but like some managed service providers in other ecosystems that are like, you know, orchestrating your Wasabi or whatever systems that they could interface with Filecoin and kind of replicate a chunk of data that was being stored with them into Filecoin storage deals. Um, I think part of their problem was like the MSPs that they had been working with had like turnover or kind of the adoption side, even within pilots, were like, things weren't, there wasn't a follow through from pilot to kind of production or GA. And so the software exists, but kind of the people didn't see an opportunity to bring it to like larger scale adoption.
I fully agree with you that one. Actually, at that time, I was one of those managed service providers at Seal. We were creating our own S3 compatible storage at the time, and Motion was offered to us, and we felt kind of confused as to why we would, get this when we're trying to make our own differentiator. And so, like, things kind of, fall apart there. And I think that harkens back to one thing we did in the past, where we put the onus on storage providers be the ones to be the salesmen and get the data themselves when they're really primarily are just people that want to rack and stack and have data flowing into there. And so, like, I agree with you completely in terms of that, in terms of the technical ideas was salient. I think the go to market strategy for some of them might not have worked in terms of focusing on the SPs if they focus on ramps, and which eventually did. They kind of saw that. They saw that that's where a lot of that worked out, is that switching from SPs to the internal on ramps was the path forward for the S3 development.
Most of the hard work was done by Singularity underneath the hood, and we were just providing an S3-like layer on top of it and some management stuff.
Yeah,
But really, it was an investment in Singularity at the time.
yeah.
You did not get merged into Singularity?
I think we did some work that did get merged into Singularity, but there was also additional layers on top of it. But we sort of
If you check the Singularity website, it says coming soon in 2024. So stay tuned. Case 5, DeStor and partner on ramps. What it was, a partner-led commercial go-to-market strategy to build vertical solutions. So DeStor was Jen's not here, unfortunately, this week. Led this program as a nucleation to work of partners to onboard data. The problems of that was that because we put a lot of the onus of development of the key technical requirements for this onto partners, not many of them were ready at the time for the deals that are coming in. The deals are coming in faster than the technology was ready to take care of things like that. Not to mention that like some of the technology, wasn't, again, POCs and not fully validated, not in market enterprise ready software. So yeah, not to mention the third thing about that is that uh, when you were on Filecoin, you got sent to DStore, who got sent to Cave, Storacha, CID Gravity. You start wondering, wait, wasn't I looking for Filecoin storage? What's happened here? I've lost a narrative. There wasn't a good branding decisions, cohesions between the ones, so people really understood that like I'm doing this for file. I came here for Filecoin. I'm doing this for Filecoin. So summary. One, technical barrier. Our abstractions are leaky. They don't meet S3 level UX expectations and fail to abstract underlying deal making friction and logistics. It can be very complicated if all you people are experts at Filecoin. Imagine, you built the main parts of it. You know it inside and out. You know exactly how everything works. The average developer doesn't know that, and they come into here, and it's very scary, and they don't know where to start, and it could result in a lot of questions, including the very basic thing is of making deals. I talked about the economic part there too. Economic discovering SPs that will set search deals for money is a core problem we discovered in our discovery calls, where people that were excited about it and actually gone through all the motions of setting up nodes and to connect. Again, this is all pro rep, as you guys know. This is BPP, just so people are aware. They didn't know who to contact, how to contact them, and how to arrange the deals, and which of the contacts are actually still around and existing. So very difficult, economic barrier for there, and that's just for the ones that were really the core hard developer Web3 adjacent. For the larger enterprise Web2 people, they just want to use fiat, and the idea of doing any other thing that storage deals and prepaying and setting all that motions, it broke their brains. 3, the commitment barrier. Beta projects don't win trust. Critical components cannot be R&D projects that get canceled. There's a common thing here where like I when I first started, I made a list of all the projects that could be relevant to my work, and what the status of them are. And there's 20 or 30 of them. I'll show you a spreadsheet at some point there of these really cool projects and really great ideas and all that. It's just a matter to get to the final barrier of it, like either achieving MVP and self perpetuating itself from improving revenue, or seeing the need based value of it being so much that we want to maintain it as a centralized as a ecosystem. Never mounts it. So, and then brand barrier. A fragmented ecosystem is confusing. You must unify beyond the Filecoin brand to build trust. We've I feel like, when we like, going back to before of DStore and all that, we have these on-ramps, we have these discussions people to upload on there, but we don't really have, like, great terms of and great ways of showing the value of Filecoin for these groups there. It's usually an afterthought or, some, like, contractually aggrieved thing to put, like, Filecoin in little words there. I think we need to be much better in terms of utilizing our Filecoin .io website and the marketing there in terms of the whole marketing engine to really spouse Filecoin, and get it really into their brains and really show when we go into the on-ramps that it is Filecoin supported, and their goal is to get you with Filecoin and the network. And the core failure, we asked partners to be merchants before we gave them a core product. We talked about that. So, what are the pillars to success? Pillar one, foundation. Filecoin Onchain Cloud. This is the why now, where I think this is the moment where things can change. The on-chain logic for automated verifiable deal making, smart contracts for data management, on-chain registration coordination, new services like PDPs, the glue for all other pillars. To get data onto ProRep, usually we have to do in the past, in my previous company, we had a S3 object gateway that we had to bundle, seal, and then send the data up to the cloud, to the source provider for sealing and the likes. Very complicated, very difficult, and turns out, if you can simplify a lot of that work with the work that's being done with Filecoin Onchain Cloud, it makes things a lot easier. PDP is a great way for you to get quick ingest of files. You need a hot storage layer that can easily be spun off copies of it into ProRep in the future. This is saying in the future this could be a thing. Pillar two, S3 compatible object storage engine. So this is the part where I'm pitching. This is not something that everyone's agreed to. This is just something that I'm kind of working on here. So official support for object storage on Filecoin Onchain Cloud. So an endpoint highly fidelity performant S3 compatible API, backend to bundle signups in an S3 gateway layer. So the idea is that if you have an S3 object store somewhere, you can connect it to signups via S3 gateway with signups that can translate it into the calls and requirements needed for contacting PDP and eventually also ProRep itself. So the idea is it completely abstracts the deal making. A put is an upload, not a deal. And the nice thing about this is that it's an additional layer above that is not required. It's for the use cases where someone just wants to use the system they're familiar with. But if you really want to go full Web3 and have all those, the parts of it, they can use the current context and work as well.
Uno, dos. Okay. For the S3 API, to what extent is this like either operating inside of the client side SDK that a client is running versus this is kind of a hosted service that is receiving data from a client and then responding with S3 primitives and then using PDP directly. Like, I'm curious in this. Sorry, I think you've skipped a couple of
I waited
steps
it.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just trying to understand, like, at the pillar 2 level,
Hmm.
the like, how decentralized is this S3 compatible object storage engine? Is this an on-ramp that is running and operating this as a hosted service that is then, doing the other S3 activities within it? Or is this trying to be, fully decentralized, no central intermediaries? And this is either operating on like the client side the same conversation we had this morning of like it's operating on the client side SDK layer, or it's some sort of network level service, smart contract or subnet based service that is offering those S3 primitives directly.
For my vision, like the former versus the latter, but that's more of a how in terms of the best way to approach it. I think we'd have the more discussions with the tech team, and I opened all of you guys to pitch ideas of a possibility of that.
Thank you. And I do S3 put and things work just as if I was talking to AWS.
You got it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So actually, we went through implementing all of this like 6 months ago. So I'm wondering, like, what's your view on the S3 API layer? Like, and generally, who do you see using this, and like in what context?
Uh,
So it's like there are many pieces here that we are kind of taking as granted. For example,
Yeah.
like
So many on-ramps have done, equivalents to this, working it, their own way. I know Akave has their way. Sriracha has their methodology too. But for the average user that wanted, has an S3, storage and maybe want to go directly onto there without all of the SLAs and all the merchant of record of the on-ramps, that would,
yeah, I mean like there are a bunch of like ideas here, but like I'm trying to understand like so I mean, just to get like a bit deeper in the context. So like when you do a put, like that's basically a file somewhere on a file system. Then like you need to think about how am I gonna put this inside of a sector? How am I gonna generate the car? How am I gonna index the pieces? How am I gonna decide how to like seal this sector? Who is gonna seal this sector? And there is like a lot of complexity that is not visible here. So I'm trying to understand like what the ideas behind these are. Like even on the S3 API layer, like it's not clear like how this implementation should be done. Is this a separate product? Then how is the
are,
bundling
are
of
you
this?
talking from an archival use case or a PDP use case?
I'm talking this from any use case. Like there is S3 is a very like specific thing. Like we all know how it works. Is that like gonna be a daemon that I run and like I interact with the S3 API and then like some files pop up like on the local file system. If that's the case, how that those files are going to be passed to the next thing, which is like now you're bundling a bunch of files, small or big, like into sectors. Then you're like deciding how you're gonna CID them, card them, and so on. Like there are like many things that like I'm trying to understand like what they're.
Yeah. I understand that, and I think is the answer to that is I don't know. There's something that I still need to work on, develop the technological plan of attack for that. But to Steve's point here, the goal is for the user, as raising users, like I want this to do to that. Is there methodology, a way we can fully achieve that? Based on our technology.
Yeah, I think what we are discussing now or presenting now is the market demand. We're trying to address a market demand. So when we talk to customers, we had a lot of conversation with customers. It's very frequent, most of the cases that we've seen that customer when they want to upload files, they want to have an S3 compatible object interface. So at this stage, I think what we are trying to get feedback on and kind of understanding is this something that is viable for us to further investigate, to further enhance? Should it be part of the basic protocol offering? And how we do that? Is it a service client side? What kind of implementation? What level of compatibility it should be? I think that's kind of the next step that we need to go and then talk to customers and talk to partners and see how much should be invested at the protocol level and how much should it be at the end of partners.
Yeah, I don't think it should be part of the protocol. Like ultimately, and by the way, like if you look at all the like things in the past that happened, like probably the best one, like the best shot that we had was Estuary, and mainly from the perspective of the issue is not the API, the issue is not S3. Like the issue is that when you have clients wanting to use S3, they expect a particular throughput. That throughput is like orders of magnitude higher than like what the Filecoin protocol is able to achieve, mainly because of PARP. So like the problem is not the ingest. The problem is like, okay, now that you have ingested that, how do you get rid of that data as soon as possible? And like the next bottleneck there is like you need to do PARP. And like all of this needs to be super tightly connected. Uh, and that's what was missing. Like
One follow-up question, Vok. I think you mentioned that you don't think it should be at the protocol level. Can you explain why?
uh, it could be a spec, but when you say it's on a protocol level, then it's not obvious what we mean there. Like I would definitely not like any consensus to be attached to that. So like for me, protocol would mean like it becomes part of Filecoin. Like so, like ideally it does not, because Filecoin is like PDP, Filecoin is like POREP, Filecoin is like, like things that we have like very structured ways of defining. S3 is not one of those, right? Like S3 could be a spec. It could be like, hey guys, these are the rules that like everyone should follow. So we are not doing like different things. For example, we had to make many decisions on how we are packing files inside of sectors, like how we are deciding like how to pack these files. So like there are many details like that like, that no one is like opinionated on how to do them, right? Like it would be great. Maybe we could share some of our ideas, but like it would be great if like we think about those as a ecosystem. But that should be on the level of car. Like a car is a thing. Like this is how you do a car. S3 is a thing. This is how you do S3 in conjunction with Filecoin. But it should not be like part of like Lotus, Kurio, whatever. Like it should be like, hey guys, like this is how to think about S3 in cars. This is how to think about S3 in sectors. It should be like a spec. Like it should not be like more opinionated than that. Like definitely not the implementation. And by the way, like even when you get into like developing it, then you'll hit into like so many issues, and like you likely go nowhere. Like you have a graveyard of like projects here. Like what makes you think that now we're positioned in a better position to do like a successful one?
Pillar one is a hypothesis, but I mean, when you're looking, I think again, this is a flag on the market, and we're also just as local timekeeper, we're past the end of this session, and so I think we should.
2 sessions.
I know, but we're well into the second session at this point, so I want to help you move forward. But like what it takes to be an S3 gateway and to operate with another entity that is trying to use S3 gateway style mentality. Like you have encryption keys, you have like bucket management, you have metrics, logs, alerts, billing. There's a subset of those things that can be built into the Filecoin Onchain Cloud, but I do think there's like an adapter level that probably needs to operate more like an on-ramp than like a on-chain smart contract that is allowing you to then hit the entire S3 interface. Maybe that is like there's a set of, there's like Singularity style. Singularity is an interesting example because it is like you run it yourself mostly, but you could also reuse it. It's like open source building blocks that you could reuse on top of, say, the on-chain cloud or on top of POREP deals to then interface back and forth. But like, at least my current hypothesis is there's a lot of details in how you actually get your S3 gateway, metadata store, object storage layer, control and management plane set up and configured and meet the needs of a client that's saying, well, I want an S3 style interface. That like my current hypothesis is we are years away from somehow being able to encode that all in smart contracts, if that ever becomes actually feasible, and I'm not 100% sure it is possible. And so that would not be the fastest way to meet the needs of these clients. Regardless, the best way to meet the needs of these clients, I think, is offer some sort of standardized S3 interface that is being operated by a set of entities,
Yes.
one or multiple entities, which are then, utilizing as much and having a full flow end to end into Filecoin Onchain Cloud, so you get all of your on-chain payments and systems, but you don't bake in the S3 interfaces into the L1 protocol itself.
One thing on top of, I think I completely agree with you, Rock. I think it's a hard problem, and it's a hard problem for our customers and people who try to onboard data. And the question is, I think for us, is whether we want to help those people to onboard and get it fast. So I don't think, I completely agree with you. I don't know if it can be done through a smart contract or should be a layer that we operate in some way. But I think that's the how, and that's kind of the follow-up question. But the first question is, should we even do something about it? Because it's a hard problem. And my opinion is that yes, we should do it because it's a hard problem, and we have years of experience with customers who's trying to use Filecoin and they get stuck because it's really hard to do it. So if we can help them and shortcut that pain, then I think it's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, and by the way, like I agree, but like it's kind of like saying, I want to build the car because it's a hard problem to do, but like ideally it would help us more, like if we had a spec for our engine, so we know like what rules to follow, because probably there is some regulation on the engine side. So again, like maybe not like the best example, but like ultimately things that we had to go through, like just to make like S3 happen, is like making sure that car generation works. Most of the libraries don't work. Like if you actually try to use them, they don't work, especially the ones not written in Go. Like, why do I have to solve these problems? Like, because like ultimately you see that your thing doesn't work on S3 because like people actually want to retrieve stuff through S3 as well. And then you figure out that the car generation is broken. Like the thing that you want to assume that works. So like that's something we would love to like definitely, you know, contribute on and like work as an ecosystem on. Then like figuring out how to like create these cars and like what do we want to put in sectors? Like do we want to put like every like entry, every put, like do you want that to be like a particular piece in the sector? Maybe, maybe not. And on the point of the smart contracts, I would maybe like ask a different question, like what do we want to be on chain? Because like ultimately I would rather try to like make the payments show up on chain than like try to like show like things that people don't care about on chain. Like clients don't care about like reading stuff on Falcon. Like they care about the data being stored, and like they care about the proofs, which are anyways on Falcon because they don't trust the providers, and that's fine. But they don't care about like this level of detail on chain. But
Yeah.
maybe we would care about like showing that $100,000 was spent for Falcon storage, like, and that's much easier to do than like going into the S3 like specification.
You're 3 minutes from the end of your total time. So
Of my total time?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like you have an extra 15-minute buffer, but like I think we need to move on from that. I think high level, we understand people want it. The proof is the details are in how you get it. Do you get it through an on-ramp? Do you get it through some on-chain system? Do you get it through something like Singularity? I think it is obvious that for Filecoin to succeed, we're going to need to have good S3 compatible object storage interfaces. Right now, our strategy for getting that is for Ramo and Akave and Aurora and various groups to build it. That's our current strategy. Should we have other strategies? Maybe, but propose one and talk about why it's like gonna work and high ROI to get there. And until we have that proposal, like talking, saying that we want S3, it's like we get it. I think the more challenging question is there a proposal for how to get there, and is that proposal going to work and be higher ROI than our current strategy, and what are the challenges related to that?
Okay.
So that'd be my nudge here, and I'd encourage you to move on.
If I'm out of time here, I can just end it right now if that works for people.
You can have 5 minutes.
Is that?
You can have 5 more minutes.
Oh, thank you. Yep. So optimization is here. Fast and read and write path via PDP. So the idea here was that in the past there was methodologies that couldn't work because you didn't have the fast read and write methodology. PDP actually have the abilities to do this fast read and writes and caching and sealing of data going forward. So there was a methodology towards that. Falcon-enabled add-on services allows gateways to trustfully customer and coordinate up with PDFs for S3-like read speeds, hot retrieval, and abstracted logic. All this complexity is hidden. Fuel, payment abstraction. A lot of things we run into is customers, they did not want to pay in coin, they want to pay in fiat. So we need to have methodologies and ways so that we can connect people's straight payment processors directly towards Filecoin Pay and be successful. 5, Falcon GTM strategy. So the idea would be that partners, on-ramps would be the merchants of record, such as Ramo, such as Akave, and Storacha, all these people that we talked about before that have these, S3 developed systems, deploy the packages and build services on top. So the idea would be that rather than every single on-ramp have a disparate S3 system, there would be one unified one that can enable data portability. Let's say you want to switch storage providers and be a lot less centralized, be a lot more decentralized so people can switch between the two. Marketing sales engine, using Filecoin as a trusted official directory, drive call leads for our partners, something we've done before, but improve the branding of that and the connection with these on-ramps to be successful. And then the virtuous cycle and unifies our brands, empowers partners, and ends the beta forever problem.
Sorry, can we go back to that slide? Because I think it's really interesting, and I would love comments from like Stefan and Vuk on this. Like from my vantage point, like this is kind of what Vuk was saying, well, like make it a spec. Like it is a spec. It's maybe some amount of reusable code and modules, but like how Akave is like connecting Akave's backend versus Ramo's backend, like there's on-ramp specifics of how they're managing and delivering that service that are different under the hood that couldn't be reused one-to-one between those different on-ramps. But there's a spec of like what it needs to offer in order to be a offering shown in filecoin.io/store. Maybe there's also a testing process, which would actually probably be really useful for anyone who like, I think we have found in the past that it's really great to have some level of community supported like monitoring, testing, like evaluation of like, is this meeting quality concerns before any of us are going and being like, hey, customer, try and onboard with this API. And then we catch annoying bugs that then create customer service issues. So that marketing sales engine could also be a quality assurance QA engine that is evaluating those different endpoints. And, it's solving your problem from a brand perspective, but it's also enabling on-ramps to offer these S3 APIs that maybe have slightly more bespoke logic under the hood based on how they're connecting in with like Synapse SDK or directly calling warm storage services themselves or whatever solution it is.
Exactly. Easier to adapt, easier to maintain. Not centralized, but decentralized approach so that you can have all the features of decentralized world, but also have S3 compatibility.
I agree on the store part, but on the S3 part, like the spec is already defined. We use the AWS spec. Even Google uses the AWS spec when it comes to S3, so I don't think we should worry about that specifically. But like the portability in the backend, yeah, I agree there. I mean, if you look at Akave's integration, the way we do erasure coding and the spread, and even like the whole integration with PDP, while we use erasure coding and also do the encoding and the encryption and all that, that's our spec, right? That has nothing to do with any other on-ramp. So we can talk about making that a spec or making that more of a uniform way of storing data so it is more portable. That would solve that. But like right now, I guess because it's not defined, yeah. That's hard to do, yeah. Like, well, for instance, also there we follow the AWS spec when it comes to authentication and encryption. When it comes to like, for instance, our GUI, we use like the authentication platform, like through Google or through GitHub, like the most common ones. But there are multiple other ways to do it. It's just because it's not defined, we've looked at to like, what does these enterprise customers want, and we spec it that way.
From target customers we have, they want like authentication or encryption, role-based access control, pre-signed URLs, all standardized stuff that if you're at this on-ramp versus that on-ramp versus that on-ramp, it becomes data portability becomes a huge issue there. So having a unified data structure and way to make these calls to Filecoin Onchain Cloud will solve a lot of these issues.
Yeah, I mean, like the S3 part is, I mean, like kind of feels like, oh, that's what we should be talking about, but that's a solved problem. Like, I assume that you're not implementing S3 from scratch. Like, it doesn't make sense to do that. So, like, everyone is using like solutions that already exist. This is Ceph, this is Minio. Like, you have stuff that works. Like, you don't want to get into that. The part that is the important part, which is also not obvious, like what people should do, and that's where you have like different people making different directions, where the ecosystem needs to step in and say, oh, this is a particular way of thinking about this, is okay, now that I have files, like you did a bunch of puts, okay, these files can be super small. They can be like kilobyte files, which is often like the case because S3 actually works. So people bombard the S3 API with even small files. But cars are not great with small files. Like you actually need to like think about like how you're gonna pack these files. Like so, like for example, we have to have like separate indexes, not IP9, like something else that actually scales well. That have like the notion of like these small files like are contained in this big sector that is 32 gigabytes, and like all of these like decisions that we had to make uh, are basically things that like I think you should focus on, like because ideally that's cycles that we spent that like other people should not spend, like if that's what we want to do here.
I agree completely.
And then test like, okay, now this is in a sector, like how is this contained and like so on, which is also a separate thing where we are still struggling, like making Lotus testable, because like ultimately to say, okay, Lotus works, like, and like we assume that like this part of the complexity is covered, like we need to like completely be able to test that on Lotus, simulate that sector on chain, and then simulate again, like the extraction of that.
Exactly. And my job is not to take away and discredit all the hard work you guys have done to get onto Filecoin. And not in any way. My job is to make your lives easier to get onto Filecoin. And any way I can to, create the feature functionality or the specs, unified specs, that's my role here in order to get everyone on board and get, S3 to increase. So I love to have more conversations with you, Akave as always, and Staracha, wherever they may be. I think that's it for me, guys. That's the end.